And thank you everybody for joining us here after what has no doubt been an eventful and insightful first day at Deliver. My name is Rob Maslamoney, and I'm the Global SVP in our logistics business, leading our PMO Transformation Office, as well as our Global Operations Excellence and co-leading our post-merger integration. Just a little bit about me before I start. I've been in the business for around 25 years. I've worked across all major continents in various parts of the supply chain, ports, logistics, shipping, etc. And I've also had a small stint as a diplomat in West Africa for one of the EU countries. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the Q&A. So today I'm going to talk about what DP World is doing to ensure a more resilient and efficient retail supply chain. We live today in a world that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Things that used to be considered as a black swan, like an extended El Nino impacting water levels in the Panama Canal, COVID-19, things like the Ever Given blocking the Suez Canal, or more recently, some of the issues we see, geopolitical instability in the Bab el-Mandab Straits, blocking the Red Sea, where 55% of the ocean capacity is diverted via the Cape of Good Hope, impacting the supply chains. Within retail and lifestyle particularly, these supply chains can extend for thousands and thousands of nautical miles from an origin source point to the final point of sale. Retail supply chains are typically, I would say, in a motion of flux. More and more changes in consumer behavior. You see more and more pressure in terms of being able to deliver faster, able to provide a cheaper cost base, to provide a more sustainable supply chain and real-time visibility. At DP World, I'm going to talk about what we have been doing over the plus 50 years to both innovate and transform our business to be able to be primarily positioned to help bring resilience into the supply chain. If you look at markets like East Africa, Southeast Asia, we have a significant customer base that requires a flexible supply chain, many retailers, etc., flexible routing. If you look at a lot of the challenges faced in this region today with unpredictability, issues like geopolitical instability, etc., DP World has been responding to this by investing in key infrastructure. One of our flagship facilities in Jebel Ali, which is located in the Arabian Gulf, we've just celebrated 40 years in that facility. We've been investing over time into infrastructure, expanding capacity and our footprint, and providing end-to-end logistics solutions. One example is that today in our port business in Jebel Ali, we have over 100 berths. We have more than 80 weekly services calling that port. It's strategically located. In the special free zone, we have around 10,700 companies providing end-to-end integrated logistics solutions. In fact, DP World Logistics is one of those customers. We operate a CFS around 134,000 square meters under roof, 14 meter high, VNA capability, cold stores, temperature controlled, ambient, etc. And with this capability set, we are able to absorb surges and shocks in the global supply chain by routing capacity into infrastructure that we own and operate, providing our customers with a more predictable, more cost-effective, and more reliable supply chain. Another example, similar investments, is in Romania, Constanta, where we've taken a traditional port facility. We've invested over 130 million euro by providing integrated end-to-end solutions in a hub-and-spoke based principle, connecting via road and rail, bringing the sustainability component, and positioning Constanta as a key gateway both for Europe and Asia trades. And I'll talk more about this theme as we go through the presentation. Now, DP World, who are we and what do we do? In the early 70s, around 50 years ago, we started as a small, humble port operator in Mina Rashid, employing about 150 people and doing about 100,000 TEU. Today, we operate in over 75 countries. We have over 115,000 employees across 7 continents. we've been transforming our organization from a single service provider loading, discharging, and storing containers to providing integrated end-to-end solutions for our customers, transforming from being a asset-based portfolio managed organization to being a customer-centric logistics service provider. And you'll see in the timeline behind me, in the last 5 years or so, we've been investing significantly outside of our core. Now, when you look at our business today, we do around $20 billion of top-line revenue. Around 55% of that, or $11 billion, comes from our logistics business. Port and terminal will continue to remain our core, but we will continue to invest in logistics. To give you an idea of our different business segments today, we have 3 core segments. In port and terminal, we operate 70 marine and inland assets across the world. We have around 103 million TEU of capacity throughput. That makes us the single largest port operator in the world. We have an average concession period of 32 years. Now, why is this important? As a customer, as a retailer, we operate the largest number of gateways and choke points globally. We have the operational ability to execute, and we have got scale. Very important. Secondly, 75% of our port asset base is import-export market related. We do not play in the transshipment game. Why is that important to our customers? Because we invest in corridors and gateways that stimulate not only infrastructure, but the flow of trade, both through technology, third-party service providers, and our own infrastructure and assets. Another division in our business, which is marine. Lots of people don't know this, but we own, operate, and charter a fleet of over 110 cellular container vessels. We have a formidable marine network east of the Suez, in Asia, in Indian subcontinent, in East Africa, and of course in the Arabian Gulf in the Red Sea. We have a marine network in the Mediterranean and continental North Europe, and we are expanding rapidly in Latin America, particularly in the Caribbean. Over and above this vessel network, we have around 130,000 containers, lots of different types, standards, 40-foot highs, special reefer equipment, specialized ISO tanks, etc. And of course, we operate a lot of technology around the marine business that complements our core port business. Then in logistics, we have 3 to 4 core subdivisions. We have freight forwarding, which I'll talk about next. That's the new kid on the block, and we are challenging the status quo on that. We have contract logistics. I will also talk a little bit more about that later. Very relevant for the retail segment. We have freight management, fairly large capabilities across Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, and building very fast in Asia and the Indian subcontinent, both by road and rail, including an electrification of that asset and network base. We have a parks and special economic zones, and we have market access, which is really demand generation, purchasing goods directly from beneficial cargo owners and running it through our supply chain network to the end consumer, largely in fragmented and developing markets. Now, at DP World, the customer really sits at the core of what we do. Today, it's no longer about responding to customer needs. It's about anticipating what the customer's needs are. And in order to do this, it's also important to understand what is required within the various segments. We have 8 core verticals at DP World with around 22 sub-verticals, deep-rooted knowledge specialized across these capabilities, of which retail is a core vertical and growing. I will also talk a little bit more in the upcoming slides about some acquisitions that we've done to acquire assets within this space. Over and above these 8 verticals, we take an asset-appropriate approach, partnering, innovating with many different suppliers, and we have a strategic intent to be competitive in each and every one of these capabilities. You'll see in the box behind me, we have 19 capability sets that range from freight forwarding to marine, to express, to port and terminal, to trade financing, to market access. Now, what's important here, particularly for retailers, as a customer of DP World, You have a single accountable party end to end in the supply chain. One throat to choke that owns and operates assets in an environment that is highly volatile. We have the ability to bring resilience, predictability, and visibility to these supply chains. Now let's talk about the new kid on the block. In the last 19 months, my colleagues and I have been working, let's say, ferociously, step by step, on building our freight forwarding network. As I stand here today, we have 285 locations across the globe in 67 countries, employing thousands of talented individuals. That's both organic and inorganic. And when you look at our freight forwarding business, maybe I move to the next slide. So what we are doing is fairly different to the traditional build of freight forwarding. We don't just operate logistics, we own logistics. Secondly, our customers are not just getting rates and routing from us. They are getting access to priority assets. They're getting assurance on capacity. They're getting real-time visibility, and they're getting schedule reliability. This, folks, is not traditional freight forwarding. It is asset-backed. It's digitally enabled through our platforms that we own and operate, and it's globally synchronized across a global team in 7 regions, all interacting together. Now, when we talk about retail, we've been expanding both organically and inorganically. Around 1/3 of our organic freight forwarding network sits in Asia Pacific, mainland China, Southeast Asia, North Asia, etc. We've closed a series of acquisitions, all public knowledge. You can Google this. Some of the recent acquisitions is a company called Cargo Services, very strong asset base in mainland China, large footprint of DCs, very strong origin services and PO management capability. Over and above this, we've acquired recently a company in the US called Unique Logistics, very strong in the retail space, including other acquisitions in Europe and Southeast Asia. When we look outside of freight forwarding in our port and terminal space, we operate multiple assets in China, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, etc. In fact, in Australia, 40% of all the ports operated in the country is managed by ourselves. I'll talk later to that in a case study that we've done for a retailer fashion store in Australia. And with this asset base and infrastructure, we are able to respond in a proactive way to our customers. So let's talk about some examples. We have a large home goods retailer that has had a huge amount, a disproportionate amount of sourcing concentrated from one region. Challenges that this retailer has faced is, of course, impact on inventory levels, high cost, particularly outside of the peak season with disruption, and concentrated sourcing from one region. Through our asset base across the globe, we were able to nearshore around 30% of this production into Eastern Europe and Latin America, bringing the source of goods closer to the demand location. By doing that, we were able to reduce lead time by up to 5 weeks and a reduction of 15% in cost, and also able to provide the customer with a broader base of supply, mixing away from a fragmented origin. Another example, as I've mentioned, is an Australian women's fashion brand. This company had a very complex supply chain, sourcing inbound material from multiple locations, Southeast Asia, mainland China, etc., using multiple consolidation centers, providing vast capabilities, and then re-exporting mainly into Southeast Asia and the UK. And by the way, in the UK, 75% of all trucks that pass into and out of the country by sea, by vessels, come through our facilities. We were able, through our asset base in Australia, to consolidate all of this inbound flow into one, let's call it multi-consolidation center, using our ocean network to provide inbound sourcing. in that facility, we were able to provide bespoke VAS services, label, kitting, packaging, etc. And then through our network, we were able to re-export into Indonesia, Malaysia, and the UK, interfacing with assets, infrastructure, and talent that we have in those markets to reduce complexity, to provide more resilience within the customer's supply chain. So 2 examples of how we match all of this together. Then, of course, I can't leave this stage without talking about artificial intelligence. I think firstly, AI, of course, is quite important. We see a lot of benefits and use cases for deploying automation, AI, LLM, etc. in our business. But all of this leverages on strong data sets and data foundation, so granular semantic data. We spend a lot of time on working across multiple technology systems. In fact, we own our own technology team in Bangalore, where we develop our own tech and IP. And then within this, we, of course, use this base data to leverage, let's say, analytics to identify how can we route cargo faster. For the home goods retailer, we use some data to optimize routing. We try and take this data and we try and understand how could we increase load factors in shipments, how could we reduce emissions, how could we find better ways of moving cargo, linking both to our assets and third-party assets. And we will continue to invest and innovate, whether it's in our ports, in our freight forwarding business, or in our contract logistics facilities. Then lastly, we've got a big commitment when it comes to sustainability. I think at DP World, we take a 2-pronged approach, really. We look at our asset base. How can we invest in our assets to reduce CO2 emissions? This is around electrification. This is around cleaner fuels, alternative fuels. It's around solar power. I'll give you one example of how we're doing that. And of course, it's around technology, using technology to do things smarter and more efficiently. If you take Saudi Arabia as an example, in 2000, one of the first areas where we've taken a concession outside of the UAE, we've invested $800 million in our core port and terminal asset in the Red Sea, Jeddah Islamic Port. We have doubled capacity from 2 million to 4 million TEU. We have dredged in the quay and the turning basin 19 meters of draft. This means you could put 3 to 5 mega vessels side by side on 3 kilometers of quay wall. We've got around 19 Superpost Panamax ZPMC cranes and 60 RTGs, semi-automated, leveraging of technology. From a sustainability perspective, less than 1 kilometer from the quay, we've invested in a 415,000 square meter integrated logistics park. We are currently building 185,000 squares under roof, 14 meter high, A-grade warehousing, all solar powered. It will be the largest integrated logistics park in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have a solar panel solution that will produce 20 megawatts of solar energy, recycling of grey water, etc. And over and above this, through innovation, we are expanding our footprint across the kingdom. So by doing this, we are leveraging on assets. We are leveraging on our abilities to develop technology bespoke to the region and provide customers with solutions where we can optimize and influence. So on that note, we have a lot of time for Q&A. If you have any questions that we maybe don't answer here today, please come and visit us at booth A60. For those coffee lovers, I can attest to some really good coffee. And if not there, I'll be around on the floor tomorrow and I'll be happy to talk to all of you. Yeah. Thank you, Ernst.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this passionate introduction about DP World. And it's always good to see sort of, when you're in the industry, to hear people sort of talking about sort of all the expansion and the plans that are out there. This QR code enables you to put a question forward. We can also throw in the microphone in the audience. So if you have a burning question, feel free. I will pick it up at the iPad or otherwise. Yeah. So, Rob, before we give the floor to the audience as well, You were talking about expansion, and there's a clear path for DP World going into this, I would say, huge global play in a way. But we're also here on the innovation stage, right? Sort of, how do you marry the two? Being this big strategy play versus also trying to be the agile innovation. Is that how would you see that?
So first, Ernst, I would say that innovation runs in our DNA at DP World. I mean, if you just look at the UAE, 50 years ago, you had less than 10 vehicles registered in Dubai. Today, for any one of you that have visited Dubai, there's 36 lanes cutting through the country with multiple traffic jams. And I think that innovative DNA steps down into the culture and the organization. Some notable examples, if you take port and terminal, typically today, you find heavy infrastructure around densely populated cities, high cost, accidents, etc. Typically, you see 5 to 7 high stacking in the bay areas that provide security issues. One of the areas that DP World is innovating is Box Bay. We actually go up to 11 bays high. It's fully automated stacking. It works in areas of highly dense population. It reduces cost. It increases operational efficiency. It provides more predictability and control within the supply chain. Another example, as we grow, is maybe freight forwarding. As I've mentioned, we are not building a traditional freight forwarding network. We are building an integrated end-to-end network that is commercially focused, that has the ability to be agile in the way it operates. We have global shared service centers. In our core service center, we have a control tower, a global command center, if you want to call it, that provides a lot of the analysis and data information that comes out of the business. And of course, through leveraging of our own technology stack, we have a full end-to-end process from the time shipments are loaded up until the time empty containers, etc., are returned, down to PO visibility. So I think innovation is really in the DNA of the organization and in the culture of the Emirati people as well. And I see that daily in the organization.
Yeah, because you could argue, hey, you're growing so big and whatever. So if do people still have space when you're working in an organization like that? Yeah, to stay innovative and to push their own ideas.
Yep.
And do you have examples maybe on that?
Yeah, so I look at my own leadership team in the logistics business. Once a quarter, we are going off-site actually. We're getting out of the business. We're getting together as a leadership team. It's no teams, it's no calls. We're talking about the future. We're talking about our North Star. We're looking at the way we are building. And that's a cross-functional team. Our technology teams, our operations teams, finance, shared services, they're all contributing end-to-end. I also think if you look at our technology roadmap, a very big part of our value proposition, our unique selling proposition, is the ability to provide exception management and PO level visibility within freight forwarding. A lot of what we build takes into account feedback from the customer community. So we are always on the lookout either for external consultants, external expertise, or customer input in terms of what's happening in the market, what are some of the new trends. I think that's how we step out of the day-to-day, because when you are building at scale, it is very important to get, let's say, focused on the detail. Yeah.
Sure. And you're saying and you're mentioning in your presentation also a few examples, working with the clients or working with the customers on a new solution that may not have been there. Because you have this huge amount of different up to finance, even as a trade finance, So where does this really come together? Where you say hey, you gave one or two examples.
Yeah.
We're also here in the e-commerce area.
Yeah. I think Ernst, for us at DP World, it's not a one size fits all solution. It's about saying, look, we've got a very broad base of capabilities end-to-end in the supply chain, including our market access, where we take over control of inventory ourselves. And I think it's about understanding first and foremost the customer's needs, knowing what our capabilities and strengths are, and then working jointly to stitch together bespoke solutions. Yeah. my commercial teams or our commercial teams are not running around pushing off-the-shelf products. Of course, we do that and we have that, but it's really about bespoke solutioning. Yeah.
And maybe also can you give me a little perspective as well? Because you're saying sort of, hey, we're now moving more and more in that freight forwarding area, because that's a lower asset base, maybe more in this one. It's new, but it's not new, right, in the market. So what, makes you stand out as DP World in that domain?
That's a good question. So look, I can sit and I can talk quite a bit about our assets and infrastructure, but I think in the end, this is a people business. Your assets have legs. If you don't treat them right, if you don't invest in them, you can lose them. I think for us, what makes us different is that, our transient competitive advantage is the ability to have a large global network of talent across various regions that then have access to infrastructure and technology that they own and operate. I think that's the big difference. And let me bring that to retail, because we're talking about retail logistics here, right? If you look at one of the acquisitions that we've done in Syncreon, Syncreon is a large automotive and technology contract logistics service provider. But in automotive, you have a cyclical supply chain. You also have a lot of reverse logistics that happens. Now, that capability that we have, those assets as well that we have, is transferable into retail. In retail today, it's very much cyclical in terms of how the supply chain works. Retailers are often looking for different vendors for labor arbitrage. With DP World, we are active in 7 regions, over 75 countries, and more than 115,000 employees. So if you work with us, you have access not only to this talent and this infrastructure, but if you have to shift your operations to regions where you get better labor arbitrage, be it for tariff disputes or whatever, you have a standard operation, you have an easier transition of your operations with one service provider. And I think that's what makes us different. The fact that we've got talent across the globe, the fact that we have control of the operational execution, and the fact that we are not afraid to invest in assets, right? 32 years average concession period in markets like Somaliland, East Africa, Latin America, subcontinent. We are not afraid, Ernst.
No.
Yeah.
There's one of the questions from the audience, and try to sort of paraphrase that a bit. So the shift from brick and mortar retail, right, sort of into these whole e-commerce, and typically also with the shipping behavior that you then see within that e-commerce chain, tying that probably also back into freight forwarding. So what are the sort of the different capabilities that effectively you need to deploy when you are in this e-commerce domain? But there's also a lot of B2C, right? Sort of, how would you argue that? Is that a challenge for you, or you have the capabilities already, or you see that somewhere on the horizon as a next thing?
Look, I think no doubt for any operator playing in this space today, it's complex, right? And as I mentioned, consumer behavior is changing. There's continuous pressure on give me a product that's faster, cheaper, sustainable, and visible end to end. I think when it does come to e-com, I think again I'm going to leverage back to this harmony of both assets that we operate, So we are not strong in one part of the chain. We are strong end to end. If it comes down to planning vessels, if it comes down to berthing vessels, if it comes down to block stacking within a facility, I mean, customs, for example, in the UK, we work directly with the UK government over and above our port infrastructure to provide customs capability. We can berth vessels ahead of others. We can block stack, discharge, do fast clearance, move it into our facilities, bonded or non-bonded. So I think in that way, whether you're talking about cash flow, whether you're talking about reliability, whether you're talking about alternatives, right? The example of the home goods retailer where we reduced lead times by 5 weeks, leveraging off our asset base in Latin America, for me, that I think is where we have the strengths today to talk to e-com, fast-moving fashion, etc. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. No, sure. And I want to move also a little bit sort of towards this e-commerce area, right? So we're all the whole industry is coming together at this event, right? So both on the client side as the supplier side. And I think you were mentioning one of your slides was the sustainability aspect, right? And I think so that was an invite this morning with the CEO of Deliver. We should be better working together. You know, obviously we can do that. We can start tree hugging and all kinds of funny stuff to do. But how would you see that sort of? What can we do as an industry together to address that?
Yeah. So look, this is where I think it's not one party that's going to solve the issue. I think from the DP World perspective, if you look at our freight management, our last mile capabilities, a lot of our fleets are either being retrofitted or replaced today with either electrified vehicles or natural gas. We also look at different modes of transport, switching from road to rail. We do a lot of that in Europe, etc. But of course, we need to work with customers. We need to work with government. It's in the end a community that has to collectively come together. Yeah, I think it's not just one particular answer or solution to the problem.
No.
Yeah.
And where do we see sort of, hey, if you talked about, I think when we did the preparatory work on this one, you're doing a lot in transitions, right? Also within the company to make sure that some of these transitions from the business that you were to what is needed for the future.
We do a lot of inorganic acquisitions.
Yeah. So, and can you tell us a few things about that? Examples that you have, sort of inorganic growth strategy.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll come back to freight forwarding because that's where we are growing significantly. So is it more challenges that you're trying to understand or how we deal with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a sort of, hey, it's never a straight road, right? Sort of, you hope it is, but at the end of the day, but then it's also the question, sort of, how do you as management manage that transition with the challenge around it?
Yeah, so look, I think every single company that you acquire, it's a different deal, it's a different acquisition. I think from my experience, having done this now multiple times, multiple regions, I think really what it comes down to is culture. It comes down to communication, and it comes down to customer, to the commercials, right? And if you look at the rate at which we are growing in our freight forwarding space, we really are looking to acquire capabilities that we either don't have the luxury of time to develop and that we need to scale up. So I think it's about firstly identifying suitors or partners that are complementary towards your end state vision. Two, I think it's about understanding what is the complexity from a cultural perspective. As I mentioned, a lot of the talent or assets in this business have legs. And then three, it's about, there's usually a honeymoon period, 100 days when you bring this all together. It's about having a strong, disciplined execution approach on how you marry and bring the organizations together. Yeah. I think that most probably, if I have to speak more generically, is where some of the complexity sits. Now, of course, for some of you in the room that have been exposed to this, things like systems, things like finances, etc., a lot of work is done in that. I won't talk about that today because that's what I call more surgery and back-end plumbing. And whether you do one deal or 10 deals, that is more or less generic. Yeah.
No, and I can imagine if there might be people in the room that you sort of, hey, we picked a catalog of DP World. I could still fit in there. That is still should visit you at a D50 stand, right?
100%. And if you go back to my slide on the 8 verticals and 22 sub-verticals, we are growing inorganically across this space as well. So whether it's perishable, whether it's chemical, industrial, etc., these are things that we will continue to blend both from an organic and inorganic perspective. Yeah. Look, I think, I've been in this industry now for 25 years, and at DP World, it's a growth story. It's not about streamlining; it's about figuring out ways to scale at a significant pace. And I think when you talk about an ESP, right, an employee or EVP, an employee value proposition, you're at the forefront of an organization that is looking to grow, that is backed financially with a long-term sort of strategic vision. And it's an organization where ideas matter. It's not hierarchy, right? And for me, that's just the ability to come into an organization, to achieve that, and then to work collaboratively with your customers I think I don't see this often in the in the industry, at least.
I would sort of sympathize to that. As some of you may know, I run the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center at Erasmus University. So talent is a big thing that we always appreciate. And we were talking about, I think we share a bit of the passion around sort of, hey, how to develop talent. But maybe you can sort of elaborate a little on how that is running in DP World.
So I would say it's actually very straightforward in our business, and I say this very respectfully to everyone in the industry, but I compare logistics a little bit to agriculture. You don't go to a university for 5 years, get a degree, and then you're an expert. You have to actually work with someone that's seen it before, that knows the business. It's like a craft. And I think in DP World, the fact that we operate in almost every single part of the supply chain gives one the ability to go from port and terminal, heavy infrastructure, to freight forwarding, very agile in terms of assets, to contract logistics, to trade finance, etc. So that's the one part. The second part is that in DP World, 70% of development happens on the job, actually going and doing. I would say 20% is through mentorship. We put a lot of focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do a lot of mentoring, and 10% is through formal education. So I think really it's rolling the sleeves up, getting into the business, adding value, and that's how we develop our talent. Yeah.
No, I'll definitely take a look at the vacancies. Now I've heard that, so
we've hired just in freight forwarding alone over 200 positions year to date May, and I've got much more available as well.
We can talk about that later on, but thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
We talked about sort of some of the major topics, and also in your introduction you started with a couple of major shifts that we actually see are happening around the world.
Yeah.
And there's certain aspects that you just cannot influence, really, right? So we see the geopolitical frame changing every day, sort of. Yeah. On the other hand, we see the AI move where people say sort of, hey, we don't do developments in months, but we do developments in weeks. And then it was few years. How would you look at those two major developments?
Yeah. So firstly, I would encourage everyone in the audience to have a look at the latest Trade-in Transition report that we've done jointly with the Economist Impact. It talks a lot about some of these, let's say, disruptive things happening across the global economy, including nearshoring and tariffs, etc. We have a lot of thought leadership across our business working with Economist Impact to talk about this. 2025 is the latest issuance that we have. Look, I think, I'm yet to meet someone that has a crystal ball that sort of, has it all. I think at DP World, for me, we look at things in a much more transient way. I mean, the way we run our budgets, the way we look at our investments, the way we gear our organization is both a combination of long-term thinking, but agility in terms of short-term planning. I think that also supports the large asset infrastructure play that we have. We are invested in the long run, but we are also agile. And then lastly, I would say we are asset appropriate, not asset heavy. So we work a lot with third parties. We collaborate and innovate a lot with third party companies where we can scale up, scale down, and gear our business. Yeah.
And then the second part of my question was also around AI, right?
Yep.
So how would you see that?
Yep.
It can optimize processes.
Yep.
It will change the way you work effectively very soon, right?
Yeah,
100%. How are you trying to adopt that and stay, let's say, at least at a level that you understand what's happening?
So I think there's two parts of that. One, in my career, I've seen many companies rush towards embracing disruptive and innovative technology, but often fail and come short. I think one of the big challenges with that is really building a strong foundation of data. Master data management, for example, is very important. At DP World, we have let's say a target data operation model. All of our transaction systems, how do we combine master data? When we are acquiring business, how do we bring that into the organization in a structured way? How do we then use that so that AI tools, LLM, etc., is extracting content in a predictive way? One of the things, again, in freight forwarding that we are working on is a co-pilot We have a commercial co-pilot and an operations co-pilot. So think of an AI tool that ingests huge amounts of information coming out of a core TMS and using that information with external information to sort of predict what could go wrong, what things on this file is incorrect, what sort of actions does an operator need to take to reduce clearance time or potential issues at release or load stage. We work closely with both external parties and our internal teams. We have a artificial intelligence, cybersecurity and infrastructure team in Bangalore that looks at this over and above our product development. In our contract logistics space in Europe, maybe one good example, we have a CL facility serving a customer doing vinyl records. We have, I think, 60 robots operating in that facility. Every aisle is manned with an individual. The robots are moving around the facility, taking pick-pack orders, etc. So we look at this, I think, one, in a way to challenge the status quo, two, in a way to get incremental marginal improvement, but three, also in a way to ensure that we run a very disciplined data structure organization. Yeah.
Cool.
You can't escape it, Ernst.
No,
Yeah.
and I think it's you gave a very elaborate view on and how it how it can impact and what are steps that you already have taken or planning to take.
Yeah.
In
Look, I'll say
domain.
this:
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, in my view, will not replace humans, but people that use AI will likely replace those that don't use AI. So that's that's my view. Yeah.
No, true. And I think we're almost at the end of the session. Unless there's a question in the audience, real quickly, then we can still take that. If not, I would sort of try to sum up sort of some of the key sort of lessons that we learned from you, because I always thought that DP World was much more single oriented. You gave us a very broad view on where your place to operate is, where we'd like to head into, and not only for sort of the short term, but definitely also with the investments and the capacity that you have and the capacity building that you currently are deploying, really move into new spaces, and also your commitment to sustainability. I think that will make the organizers additionally happy. Any final words from you? Yeah,
look, I would say if you are looking for a partner that is a single actor or single player in the end-to-end supply chain, the ability, one throat to choke. If you're looking for someone that is not afraid to invest and take big bets in the future, then I think you've come to the right place. That's DP World for sure. And please come out to Stand A60, come and meet myself or one of my colleagues. More than happy to talk more about how we can work together and help improve your business.
Well, that concludes, I think, the advertisements that we hear from DP World. But so let's forget that last part. But be definitely there for having a great coffee together. So that applies to all of you. Don't forget to vote. The voting is still open for all the vendors up till 6 o'clock. And hope to see you here on this stage or somewhere at the drinks tonight soon. And give a big hand to Roland.
Thank you.